Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Talent Talks podcast, the show where we talk with talented people from all fields. I'm your host, Paul Drake Verge, the co-founder of Talent Trellis, where we build top-notch customer success and trust and safety teams for our small, medium enterprise SaaS companies. Today, we are very excited to have Veront Herkulian with us. Varant is a seasoned technology executive with an impressive track record in customer success, product management, and digital strategy. With over 16 years of experience spanning early stage startups to large publicly traded companies, Veront has mastered the art of driving customer value and organizational growth. He is currently the Senior Vice President of Customer Success at Ingenious and co-founder of iHome Lending. Throughout his career, Veront has demonstrated a results-oriented leadership style, blending human-centered design thinking and data-driven decision-making to achieve exceptional outcomes. Join us as we explore Veront's journey, his insights in customer success, and how he envisions the future of digital strategy innovation. Veront, pleasure to have you here today.
It's great to be here, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. It just feels like literally almost yesterday that we just hopped on a call right after. Oh, literally it was yesterday, but we hopped on a call from that LinkedIn post. We got connected, and now we're on the podcast. Like, that's how quick things happen nowadays, eh?
I love it.
Now, besides that intro that I meticulously wrote and gave you, I would love for you to, in your own words, describe what is it that you do.
So to really boil it down to one thing that I do is I deliver value and successful outcomes for my customers, right? Whatever that means. So my job of sales, for all intents and purposes, is to be kind of selling our customers and prospects on the value of our product and our services, right? And then the way I see it is when they pass the baton to me, it's my job to make sure that they are receiving that value that we promised them so that they are renewing in perpetuity and raving fans and evangelists of our products and services.
And how do you balance that need for the sales team to portray as much value as they possibly can to the customer versus like the delivery side? Like, how do you manage those expectations? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that's a great question. Absolutely, because it's a balance, right? And you'll find some, untrustworthy organizations out there that got great sales teams selling some vaporware, whatever the case might be. And then once you sign on the dotted line, you get thrown over the fence to some kind of implementation onboarding team and never hear from your salesperson again. So I kind of mandated in my organization when I was interviewing for the job and interviewing our leadership is that I wanted to be in the room when it happened. So I'm actually part of the sales cycle, call it the fifth step, right? The very last step before a deal is closed. But I come in as a sales engineer to make sure I'm in the room, make sure that I can establish customer expectations, iron out anything that might be nebulous that wasn't clear during the sales cycle, because expectations is key up front to make sure that you have a smooth onboarding process and you're starting that relationship off in the right foot, right?
And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you a little bit further about. So how are you? So are you actually on the call with the salesperson as they're like selling the deal, or are you saying like afterwards? Because I'm wondering in what point do you step in and manage those expectations?
So, they'll do initial prospecting and discovery calls where I'm not involved, but I'll come in as a sales engineer, or my team will, right? During a product demo or some, deeper dive into the platform, at which point in time we'll be able to understand the customer's needs at once and establish their success criteria up front during the sales cycle, right? Not after the fact, and make sure that we're able to deliver on that. And if there are any red flags, I can raise my hand and address it and saying, that's maybe a feature that's not built yet, right? It's feasible, plausible, but I want you to be aware it's not going to be available on day one. And part of customer success is also shortening that time to value. So the second that you say go, I need to make sure that you get the platform, the product, and the value in your hands and realize that as soon as humanly possible.
This actually reminds me of something that Alex Hermosi teaches. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy, but he's basically saying that like he used to do gym launch, and he used to sell gym owners on the idea of on like a course on how to build their entire gym, right? Build memberships. And what he was saying is like you want to make sure to have, like, in your words, the speed to value, but he said you want to make sure that the gyms the customers get as quick results as quickly as possible, because in that initial time frame, if they receive value within the first day or 2 days of whenever they signed up, it's way more likely that actually stick with it and take the time to go through the entire process, or I guess in your case, learn the entire software and learn the entire way. So is that kind of what you're finding too?
That's absolutely right, right? You got to give them that value, give them that aha moment as quick as humanly possible to get them hooked. The longer you take, the longer that relationship can go cold, that need can subside. It just ends up being 10 times more effort to try to bring them back to that, because it's at that onset where they're most excited about this relationship, just like your honeymoon when you're getting married, right?
Got it. So you really don't want to waste that precious 2 or 3 days of onboarding, because that's like where the relationship will be set, and that's when the foundation of like the value that the customer will perceive that you'll provide will also be initiated, right?
Absolutely, right? And that's my opportunity to come in with my best foot forward and really shine, build a relationship, a deepened relationship that's going to buy me some grace down the road when things do go wrong, right? I don't want to be the first time that I'm hearing from my customer's leadership team is when they have a problem, they have to escalate and give me a phone call. That shouldn't be our first meeting, right? I should have had several touch points, checkpoints ahead of time, and specifically during the onboarding process, so that they know that we're people, I'm human, and they can approach that conversation knowing that we're in it together and we're going to collaborate and we're going to overcome any obstacles that come our way, and we're going to win it together.
You mentioned something interesting just before that I really want to touch base on. So when you're in the product demo with after the prospecting, you're in the sales call, in the product demo call, do you have some sort of framework or a list of questions that you ask to really pinpoint what the customer's expectations are? Because we know, as we know, software as these things can solve a million different problems. So how do you understand what the prospect's actual problems are so that you can tailor your success management at the back end of it?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I do have some framework, but it's really in the secondary and tertiary questions that get you the answers that you're looking for. Like the gym example you're given earlier. If he's interviewing his customers and his member base that are showing up on day one and says, "What is your goal?" They're going to say, "I want to lose weight." But is that really the goal? Or do they just want to look good in the mirror when they wake up in the morning, right? They want to be at the beach and have a six pack. Does that necessarily equate to weight loss or muscle gain? So you need to ask those secondary, tertiary questions to really find out what is it they're truly looking for, so that you can help them get there in the most efficient way possible and meet those goals and objectives, because what they tell you in the first response isn't usually what they're really looking for.
Got it. So you don't really per se have like a set framework. You just know that you have to dig in 2 or 3 or 4 layers down to get to the root cause or the root reason.
That's exactly right. I'm usually going to ask them, why are we having this conversation? What's the problem that you're looking to solve? What is the goals that you're looking to achieve? What does success look for you, 6, 12, 18 months down the road? But then it's typically based on however they respond to those questions is going to drive which way I take my second question and my third question to go a little bit deeper and truly get to the root of what they're looking for.
Got it. And you mentioned also that you really take that time to build the relationship a little bit down the line to build some buffer room in case something goes wrong, or for whatever reason. So how do you go about doing that?
Well,
Or
it's
kind of
taking the time to first of all set up that kickoff call, right, and include the stakeholders and your champions that were engaged during the sales cycle, right? More often than not, sales will throw it over the fence and just say, "Go to town, implement, onboard this customer. I'm off to the next." Well, I mandate that my sales team sets up a handoff call, a handshake. I call it, not the handoff, from sales to customer success, where the stakeholders, the executive sponsors, the champions, and the implementation team from the customer side get to meet me and my team, so that we can understand who the players are in the room, how we can help each other, and have the opportunity to have a real conversation, because it's different when I talk to you right now face to face, even though we're virtual. But having this dialogue and seeing that you're a human person and not just some bot behind an email or a chat box, we're going to have a very different approach when something does go wrong. I'm going to say, "Hey, Paul," I'm not going to assume that it's your fault, you messed up, you don't care, you're incompetent, whatever the case might be. It's, Paul's a good person. He's educated, he's talented. This is inadvertent, it's not intentional. We have a problem, he's going to help me solve it. So when I call you, I'm just going to have a different approach and a different tone when I do that, which is going to lead to better collaboration, more productivity, and a better outcome at the end of the day.
Would you say that this is not like a standard practice within the industry for the sales team to have a kickoff call with the customer success team all in one room to have like to just kind of build the relationship a little more? Or is it more like you said, like sales team throws it over the fence and then whenever problem happens?
I think most people will have it somewhere in their playbook, but whether or not they actually have a discipline of having those calls, because it's very quick and easy to get busy and say, "Here's the contact information, just move forward," and skip that step because you don't see the value and the soft skills and the magic that's happening during that initial onset and that introduction. So a lot of organizations I don't believe, put enough value behind that. And it depends on the size of the platform and the intricacy that you're trying to implement, right? Usually extremely complex loan origination platforms that require a small army and 2 years to implement will tend to have these calls at the onset. But a little bit lighter tech that's attempting to be more SaaS based and as automated as possible will tend to squeeze every ounce of efficiency and automation as possible, right? And what you sacrifice sometimes is that human relationship and that human touch that there's a lot of value around. It might seem like it's costly and a high effort, but I assure you down the road over time for the lifetime value of the customer, it's very high return on effort spent.
Which is that's definitely more like the long-term thinking and like not like getting the short-term gratification of just getting to the next thing. And I honestly, I really think that makes a lot more sense because even when I'm like, let's say I'm going on customer support and I send an email to someone and they're not answering me and I don't really know who they are, like all I see is that blank screen. So already like there's some sort of distance between me and them. For all I know, it's a bot. And nowadays, for all I know, it's some chat GPT-esque response. But if I did have that kickoff call with the sales team and with you, and I know who you are, and I kind of know what your language patterns are like, then I guess you're right. That is much more different. And I know that I'm talking to Veront and I'm not talking to someone on the back end over there. So I can definitely see how that would give you way more leeway and actually will drive lifetime value down the line too.
Absolutely.
So in a world where companies love to talk about customer centricity, I think that's the big phrase that Jeff Bezos used, but I do believe he lives it. But do you think that most of them truly walk the talk, or is the customer first type thing just kind of a nice buzzword to have, great on the marketing, great on the materials, but not really there in practice?
Unfortunately, I think it's the latter, right? More often than not, it's a value written on the wall, but not necessarily embedded in their DNA, right? Because customer centricity, it's not about a customer centric product base or putting the customer first. When it's reactionary and customer support has to get involved and step up and solve problems and put out fires, it needs to be a maniacal focus across the organization. Right. It shouldn't be a single department that's focused on customer success. It's got to be the entire motion of the organization has to be thinking of that as a North Star. Right. So in my opinion, it's customer success just happens to be in the trenches and in the front lines with our customers. So more often than not, we have to be the voice of the customer internally, but it's not necessarily my agenda or objective. It should be the organization's agenda and objective to execute on that, create a delightful experience for our customers, and deliver the most value possible. And that's hard to
Yeah,
do.
that's on. Yeah, I was gonna say because like it's how do you manage the relationship between internal stakeholders, their need for obviously to maximize value for shareholders, all these kinds of things, and then also between the customers whose complaints or whose things may seem a little bit petty at the time, but ultimately is like the gold mine that will further increase your company, right?
Yeah, it's a really good point. That's why you have to have your CSMs and your customer success managers on the front lines be very well versed and trained with not just empathy, right? You can't just sit here and roll over because Jimmy's having a bad day and he needs this one report and we're just going to stop everything we're doing to help out our customer Jimmy over here. Like I understand we have to be empathetic to Jimmy, but we also have to practice some good judgment, understand the impact this has on the entire organization, our priorities across all of our other customers, and how that impacts them and our roadmap and our development sprints and time cycles as well. But they should also have the wherewithal to understand that, even in a case like that where Jimmy might be key and germane to expanding a key account, right? Or it could be the one opportunity that we have to turn a relationship around that maybe might have not the highest NPS score, customer sentiment that we're looking for, and we might have fallen short in the past. And this could be an opportunity for us to step it up and turn things around with Jimmy and his perception of our organization. And they got to be able to balance that and help bring that back to our executive team and make that visible through the organization. And ideally, I like to leverage our customer scorecards in order to get sentiment as one of the key components and drivers of that overall customer health.
Understood. That makes sense. You've led both customer success teams at startups and large organizations. Is there something you think startups get right about customer success that big companies completely miss?
Yeah, and I have to say, it really comes down to their fire and their passion. So typically every customer counts for a startup because it's life and death for them, right? They're typically bootstrapped, don't have the cash, can't afford to lose a customer, and they really care and believe about their mission and their product, that they can really create change and affect change. So that passion is burning deep down inside of them, and it just exudes from every interaction they have with the customer. They truly want to help it. Whereas that's hard to scale. And as an organization gets larger, that tends to get watered down, and that fire gets dimmed by a lot of bureaucracy that happens. And oftentimes employees don't feel empowered to really help their customers in a meaningful way that they want to, in order to have that kind of passion that what they do makes a difference. They just say, hey, that's not on the roadmap for this year. Good luck. We'll talk next year, right? Instead of truly peeling it back and finding out if there's a different way to escalate or prioritize these issues, or to champion the need for that customer. So unfortunately, yeah, I do feel that happens. However, like you mentioned with Jeff Bezos and Amazon, there are large organizations that have been able to make this part of their DNA and their fabric as they grow, and they did not sacrifice that. Right, for scale or ROI or some kind of financial short-term gains, and they realize the long-term value that they get from an organization that truly believes and feels in a customer-centric mindset.
Yeah, I think also it's just the symptom of growing pains, right? As things swell up, as you get bigger, it's almost like the best analogy I could use. It's almost like when you're a kid, every day feels so long. That's
Yeah.
because every day is like such a large fraction of your life, and as you get older, each day is just a smaller percentage of your life, which is why it feels shorter. So it's almost in the same way where it's like every customer is like your heart pumping in revenue, pumping in things. So you care so much about it, but as you swell and you get more customers and employees, each individual customer is just less of that pie, so you're more likely to lose them. But then that it also like almost evens out, because then you'll lose just enough customers where like the equilibrium strikes, and you're able to maintain them with your current customer support until something changes in the fabric, right?
Yeah, great analogy. You're spot on. Absolutely.
What do you what do you think would be a way for that not to happen as companies grow? What do you think? Do you have any ideas about how to maintain that customer centricity and that value on customers as organizations swell and the number of their customers increases?
Yeah, it's hard to do, but you have to put your customer first in every sense, right? And that also comes with vetting your customers up front, right? So you need to identify your ideal customer profile, not try to be everything to everyone just because you have to meet some revenue goals. Because what that's going to do is then put pressure on your product and your dev teams in order to support a broader customer base with various needs, right? Instead of a more focused and targeted customer base where what I do to benefit Jimmy also benefits you, Paul, and every one of my other customers. So I can deliver more with a higher velocity and efficiency, right? Versus trying to boil the ocean, and making my product too broad can be extremely difficult and spread me thin. And I've seen a lot of startups tend to pivot that way just for the sake of, short-term revenue goals.
Yeah, and that's why it's so incredibly difficult, because like at the early stages, you're clawing at all these opportunities. There's so many different things, but then you're also just scattering your focus.
Yeah,
So it's so hard nowadays, because like there's so much different things you can do, and things are changing so fast, and there's so many posts on social media that gives you all these different ideas. Like right now, the advantage isn't having the most information. I would say it's finding a way to eliminate information and just focus on what matters, because most of it is noise, as we know, right?
absolutely.
What's the most controversial customer success strategy you've implemented that others said wouldn't work, but it did?
It's an interesting question, and I have some thoughts around this. I'm not sure what I'm going to share with you is necessarily controversial, but it is kind of unorthodox in the customer success space because, as we mentioned, in a SaaS company, we're trying to squeeze out every ounce of efficiency and automate as much as possible, and go towards a low touch model whenever possible, right? Where what I was touching on before, how I like to invest in relationships at the onset and the onboarding process, I also like to do that ongoing with a customer success philosophy, right? So customer success is meant to be proactive. So we're looking at KPIs and key indicators of NPS scores, CSAT, CES, customer sentiment, adoption of technology, feature usage, and things of that nature. And if we identify any declining flags, red flags, anything going south proactively before a customer has submitted to me any kind of inquiry or discontent. And I make that outreach to them, and not just in the form of a passive email, which most people would do, but literally just pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, Paul, I see that you haven't logged in the past month, and you're, an avid user and evangelist before. Did something go wrong? Did you get stuck on this XYZ issue? There's something I can do to help you bridge that gap. I'm going to learn a lot from that call and that conversation. And again, it's an opportunity for me to deepen my relationship, let you know that I truly care about you and how and why you're using our platform, the value that you're getting out of it, versus just sending a passive email saying, log back in. Did you know that you could do XYZ in my platform? And I'm going to learn something new from you as to maybe a life event that took you away from this, or maybe your business and strategic goals have changed since we last talked during the onboarding process or our last QBR that we had. And I'm going to get that information much earlier on so that I can pivot and redirect you back to where you can get the most value out of my platform, mitigating your chance of churn down the road and building a champion and evangelist for life, hopefully.
Yeah, and this made me think of something else actually. So a lot of companies consider customer success or customer support, and correct me if I'm wrong here, they consider it like more of a cost center rather than revenue generating down the line. But it's more of like the slow burn approach where it's so intangible, because I'm assuming that the metrics that are used to measure the success of a customer support team aren't, say, directly correlated to revenue. So how do you think that companies are using the wrong metrics to judge like their customer support and customer success teams, or do you think they're thinking about it in the wrong way, or do you think that, or like, do you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're spot on. I think most people view it all wrong, and they are viewing customer success and customer support as a cost center, where it's actually an opportunity and a revenue center. So, step one mantra of customer success is to mitigate churn, even though that has a negative connotation to it. And you look at it as a cost center. If you look at your revenue forecast and projections over time, and I can mitigate your churn rate from 15% to 10%, that has a massive impact on your bottom line and your EBITDA, right? But not only from the sense of keeping renewals in perpetuity, but this is your frontline people that have the relationships and the highest opportunity to create growth within your existing customer base, to consume additional features and products and services that you have in your organization to increase revenue, not just mitigate the churn. And then on the flip side, if I make you a raving fan and truly give you a delightful experience on our platform and drive a ton of value, what are you going to do? You're likely going to refer me to your colleagues and your friends throughout the
100%.
industry.
That's
So
100%.
you are a wonderful lead source. And in our organization, the lowest cost per acquisition per new customer comes out of our customer success department, referring new people to our sales team.
Is there a quantifiable way to measure that, or do you think there needs to be some better way at kind of like showing that value for customer success teams? So people, because I know that people invest so much money in their marketing departments, and their support departments or success departments get the kind of the short end of the stick, whereas like a referral is the least expensive cost to acquire a customer, yet there's no strategies built around that.
Absolutely. We track it. We track every single one. So within our customer success tools and platforms, as we do our executive business reviews, talk to our customers, they will typically communicate to us that, hey, I'd love to connect you with Jimmy or Johnny, or a referral at another organization that could benefit from your products and services. That referral will then get created into a deal that tracks the revenue within our platform. And then they tie a salesperson to that. But the referring party and the source of that transaction is the customer success manager. And then we also, as a component of their KPIs for their bonus. So if you think about, if you incentivize them properly to deliver such a great experience and compensate them for doing the right thing, people are much more inclined to treat their customers well.
Are you guys using like a HubSpot or Salesforce as your CRM to track all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I currently do it in HubSpot. So our entire sales and marketing team's in HubSpot. And when I came on board, I just created a customer success workflow, which is very doable and attainable within HubSpot, but it's not like a gain site or anything that's built just for customer success. However, I think I've done a pretty good job of getting me close enough to be extremely effective within the tool.
And what are the key, would you say, like, what are the key metrics to track in terms of customer support or customer success?
So
What do they tell?
From my perspective, support is a key component of customer success, right? That's a reactionary measure. But if you have a problem and you reach out to me to help you solve that problem, you got to check the basics and say, what's my response time? Did you get resolution? But then you have sentiment surveys that go out as well, like a customer effort score. And I'm going to find out how hard was it for you to get resolution to your problem, right? And get a 1 to 10 rating out of that we'll track over time. That's one key component. And then we'll have CSAT scores, customer satisfaction.
So what was the name of that last one? Resilience scores?
Customer
Sentiment
effort
score.
Yeah,
Customer effort
CES.
score. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one.
And then CSAT's a key one as well, right? So that you're measuring customer satisfaction on any of your trainings and your engagements. And you got to infuse these at the right touch points, at the right part of the customer journey to make sure that you're getting the feedback in the places that you want to. And then you have to inject what I think is one of the most important ones is your net promoter score, right? How likely are you to refer me to your friends and family so that I can monetize on some of this, relationship and effort by you referring additional customers to our sales team. And that's what we were just talking about there. Those are some key components along with adoption. Payment status, have they paid their bill on time? Are they slow paying it? That could be a red flag for us as well. And then of course your CSM sentiment, because they're having conversations with these people and their gut feeling means something, and we shouldn't disregard that, and we should hear it out. Even if everything else looks good, they might have some contextual information that hasn't been shared or picked up from our other listening paths.
And as with all these kind of metrics, are you looking for, you're not probably going to, obviously there's going to be outliers. One time someone's not going to be happy, one time someone doesn't promote, but I'm assuming you can't let those outliers really affect your strategy. What you're kind of looking for is patterns at the end of the day. You're looking for common patterns and kind of digging into those issues through that way, right?
Yeah, you might not make executive decisions and pivot your strategy based off of an outlier, but I will tell you every single survey response, right? Every single warrants a response from our team, right? Whether it be good, bad, and different, their feedback should never fall on deaf ears, and your customer should feel that their voice is heard. So instead of just the automated "thank you for submitting your survey," I literally make sure that every one of our CSMs responds to one of those with not a templated email, but a handcrafted email to each one. It takes 5 seconds to write 2 lines and say, "I'm sorry we fell short. Do you have a few minutes to talk so I can understand what I can do differently to better serve you?" Right? It takes a few seconds, but it's meaningful when it's just a real human message and specific and not just
Yeah.
something.
I'm starting to kind of understand your approach a little bit better, and I can really see that your approach is much more customer centric, much more relationship oriented, and then you really emphasize these little simple things where it's they're super easy not to do, but they're super easy to do as well. Like having that kickoff call, having that responding to your customer through everything that they reply through, right? These tiny little things that may not seem like much, but if you add them up together, really crafts this really detailed and really well-rounded customer experience.
Absolutely. I like to always equate it back to my early years when I was I like to always bring it back to my early years when I was a server in college, right? And that as a server, if I could anticipate your needs before you tell me what you need and just give you a little bit more than what you'd expected, you're going to give me a nice tip, right? You're going to have a better experience. Yeah. We're all going to win. So you shouldn't ever have to tell me you need more iced tea. I'm going to see that you're 2/3 of the way done with your iced tea and walk by and refill it and ask you how your meal is doing, right? And it's just that easy.
And I like the saying to kind of encapsulate this thought. I might actually write it down for my team now. All it takes to be extraordinary is that little extra.
Yeah, I love it. I'm gonna put it on my wall.
I'm gonna put that one on my wall too. I like that in a different context. If we're being honest, do you think that most companies overcomplicate customer success? What do you think the biggest waste of time that teams should stop doing right now?
Yeah, I think, a lot of people don't know where to start and what to measure, right? And then once they kind of figure out oh, I can measure these things, but I don't. And then they kind of get a little bit overwhelmed on figuring out and trying to automate this elaborate scorecard to bring this in from a bunch of data warehouses and disparate systems. So they got a real-time dashboard and feed on the wall. And you don't have to do all that, right? I mean, the key number one is figure out what matters. What are these key performance indicators, your KPIs that you're going to be tracking about your customer, and start tracking them, right? Whether it be quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily is not as relevant. And it doesn't have to be set in stone. Just get started. And then by starting it, you're going to learn and adjust and pivot and add additional KPIs, take some away. So, think of it just like your product in a SaaS model. You're running sprints and you're pivoting and you're constantly making incremental change to improve. And that's how you should look at your customer success philosophy, strategy, and your scorecards as well. Don't get too stuck on perfection to get in the way of progress, right, on day one.
And how would you determine when a KPI is relevant and should be used and when it's time to take one away?
You have to take a look and reflect on what I think your churn and look at your progress, right? So a quarterly, monthly, yearly, I need to see, hey, these 3 customers churned. Why did we not know this in advance? Where was the red flags? In hindsight, right? You need to have like an after action review, some kind of post mortem, and say, what could we have done differently to save this? And how could we have known that about that in advance? And to your earlier point, there's some anomalies that you're not going to be able to account for. You don't want to try to boil the ocean, but oftentimes you'll learn simple things that you could have done differently that apply across your customer base, and then you'll measure it and see, and you test that hypothesis theory like anything else, and you start to adjust and add and remove accordingly.
This is where I personally struggle, and I don't know why, but for example, when there's a problem, I always think that like I need like 5 different solutions. I have to figure out which is the best one, then I have to implement it. But what you're kind of saying is, okay, like see where the problem is, identify the problem, make a hypothesis, like why do you think this happened? And then just come up with 1 or 2 solutions. Maybe even one is probably better. Test
Yeah.
it and see if there's an increment. And then just kind of A/B test it. Like see, like, hey, okay, let's try this one and then this one and this one and this one, and then see which one works better.
Exactly right. I like to make database decisions, and that's just pure science. If you change too many variables at one time, you're not sure where the impact came from and where the change occurred, right? So just change A/B testing to your point, one at a time, and see what's moving the needle. But as long as you have a maniacal focus on this as your North Star and striving for continuous improvement, you're going to make a lot of progress when you look back over time.
So it is okay. So I think that's something that you mentioned that you kind of glossed over, but I think it's very important. Finding out what that North Star is. Because if you don't have that North Star, if you don't have that like little needle that you're filtering every decision through, then you don't really know where you're heading towards either.
Absolutely. And it's key for developing your company culture, for having a customer centric outlook. Like, what is that North Star? And that requires a little bit of soul searching and maybe some strategic offsite meetings to kind of figure that out over time. You don't want to just make it an exercise to wrap up the meeting and check the box and write something on the wall in terms of values, right?
How would you like in the companies that you worked with in the past? How did they go about formulating values, and how do they go about actually like sticking with those values? Do you have any like practical tips and advice for anyone listening to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the gamut, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Honestly, most of them didn't stick and failed to execute and infect a company culture more than just writing words on a wall. But the ones that did work, they had the buy-in around the leadership. Their leadership truly believed in it, top down, around the corner, and they were arm in arm. Even if somebody during the strategy session didn't necessarily agree and had different opinions, once they made the decision collectively as a group and they decided to all get behind it collectively and create change to the organization and stay the course, those are the ones that were successful down the road. And sometimes it started with just one person championing that and getting the buy-in around the leadership before they all got in. But if you don't have the buy-in to leadership, you're not going to get buy-in at the ground floor.
And would you say like what is that those important things? Is it values? Is it a mission statement? Like what is it that people have to like really buy into?
Honestly, it's all of it. I started out thinking in business school that this was just fluff, organizational behavior, soft skill, and there's no value to it. But everyone in your organization should be able to tell you what your mission statement is, what's real, right? They should be able to know your 30-second elevator pitch on your product and be able to find your value proposition. They should be able to tell you what's important to your culture, because those values should be how they make decisions without coming to you every time asking you what they should do, right? That should be their North Star to guide them when they're in the trenches with their customers, and they can't do any wrong if they, stay within those confines.
To kind of bring this full circle back to our question earlier about how do big companies kind of not like not have as good customer success teams down as they swell up. I think that makes a lot more sense. So if you're the larger your company gets, the more diluted your values get. So it really takes like a strong leadership, a team, a strong leader to really like embody that. And only by embodying at the top will it eventually trickle down. And like the larger you get, the more the person has to embody it, and the leadership team have to embody those values for it to be trickle down all the way through the organization. But it gets harder because as you get more successful, things may change. You may have differing opinions. So maybe that's why it's just anyone who's truly ever successful in the industry just stays in it for 30 years and just embodies it. That's the hard part. The hard part isn't the changing, it's the keeping what the
Staying
principles.
the course, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Interesting.
absolutely right. And to your point too, like as you scale an organization, you scale your leadership, you tend to bring people in from outside the organization, and they start to try to build their own fiefdoms, and you tend to fall into these silos, right? So I'm a big believer in trying to knock those walls down.
I agree. I agree with you. There's in the customer success, customer support space, there's a ton of debate about the role of automation and chatbots in success and customer support. Are they really improving customer experience, or are they just a way to cut costs at the expense of quality?
That's a great question. So I think they can be a key factor in driving a great customer experience and improve the experience in an efficient way that you can scale. But it has to be done in a very meaningful way with human centered design thinking, right? With the customer in mind and putting them first. Don't just do it to check a box and say, I don't have to hire 3 different customer support people if I have a bot here doing password resets for me, right? Because again, someone's going to come to you for a password reset, but that's not really what they needed. They need to get into your platform in order to extract XYZ information to perform this task. And if they don't get the successful outcome they're looking for all the way down the road, you failed. You didn't meet their needs, right? And maybe that bot can reset their password, but that was just step one of their true need and why they came to you. And they fell short and they had no way to access a real person, or it was just arduous for them to sit in a holding pattern when they have this burning fire and a deliverable they have to tend to because they can't get to what they need. So you have to have a very thought through waterfall in a workflow and engagement manner that's not going to slow that down. That's not going to create barriers and more friction, because when your end users look for support, you need to make it as easy as humanly possible for them to get the answer they need, right? Not as cheap as possible for you to give it to them.
Yeah, and that just relies back to like the view of customer support and customer success as kind of like a cost center. But I think with AI and with these chatbots, I think we're really going to start to see that bit of a shift, and people are going to be start seeing more of the relationship value of it, because it's I definitely don't think it's going to replace customer support and customer success agents outright, but it may just reduce the need for them, or have them answer more complex questions. But at the same time, how do you balance that? Because there's nothing more annoying than having to click 1,000 bots than get to the customer support agent or the customer
Right?
success agent like that. I will leave a product for that.
100%. I've done it before too. I don't have the patience for it. Right? My time is valuable, so treat it accordingly. And so if you had an accelerated waterfall and didn't um, shortchange the people and the resources that you need in your customer support to be able to field that exactly, and just made them more effective and efficient in what they do so they could focus their time and energy and higher touch and more complex scenarios, then that's a win-win, right? But if you're trying to run an entire support team of 30 with just one offshore person because you got a bot in place, that's going to fail. So you got to watch these metrics. You got to make sure that people aren't sitting in arduous hang times indefinitely just to get frustrated at you, and are able to get what they need out of your platform.
Do you see a world in where, like, if there's a chat GPT type model trained on people's products and trained on people's softwares, do you see a world in where that can handle the majority of requests, or is there some unknown factor we're not seeing that that could be like a missing piece of that puzzle?
I don't know about majority, but it could take away those small repetitive tasks very clearly, right? So if I could sit down and write you a playbook or FAQs just as easily, maybe I can get more value out of a natural language model with a chat GPT, having a conversation with my end user instead of pointing them to go read through, 40 different FAQs to get to that answer. But once you get to more complex scenarios that you haven't necessarily documented yourself in your standard operating procedures, how would you expect the chatbot to be able to do that, right? So you got to be able to
Mm-hmm.
crawl, walk, run, and do that yourself with a human interaction before you can train or teach machine learning to do that for you in an effective way.
And what do you think? Do you think that like ultimately the future of this industry is just all going to be taken over by chatbots or these advanced large language models, or do you still see a place for humans in there?
I think there'll always be a place for humans, right? This will just force us to elevate our game and take it to a next level and focus our time and energy in delivering value in ways that a bot and automation cannot, right? And let them handle the more remedial tasks at the front line. And your humans will be more the escalated tier two type of support for the more complex scenarios.
It could also be the fact that as these large language models start to take over people, I mean, we're already seeing it right now. There's a huge loneliness epidemic, especially with like young people, young men, very very lonely. For the more connected we are, the less we are like
Yeah.
experience true connection. So it could even be the fact that the relationship aspect of it, that empathy, that part will be much more relevant than before, even though it's important now, but maybe even then it's like customer success and support will double as therapists.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's pretty funny.
Some companies treat customer support as like a necessary evil rather than a value driver. What do you say to CEOs who would still see it that way?
Unfortunately, I don't think those CEOs are going to be around very long if that's how they run their organization. I know that might seem kind of brutal, so I tend to avoid the CEOs that view it in that manner, right? And that's kind of part of my vetting process before I hitch up with any kind of organization. I wouldn't start there necessarily in such a harsh shut the door type of thing, but I would kind of go back to a lot of what you and I discussed on how it could be a revenue center, how it could help build lasting relationships, increase your retention rate, mitigate churn, serve as a revenue center by driving referrals and new customers your way, and really just give them the textbook on customer success and support and how it can be used as a meaningful revenue driver. And it's not just a cost center. But yeah.
I, I think the difficulty with that is that like if customer support and success teams are operating at the highest level, it really seems that like you don't need them. And what I mean by that is because you'll see no churn, so you'll see higher LTVs, and it's like, well, look, our product is so great that these things are just cost centers. So I see it like down the line. What might happen is they might cut down or shut down the support team. Like, oh wait a second, this was why, and then bring it back up because it's
Yeah,
kind of a static.
I can see exactly what you mean. Is that you work your way out of a job if you do a really good job, kind of thing. But believe me, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never run out of work. Right, so it just doesn't get there. Our product team and engineers will continue to innovate and build new things that require us to bridge any gaps in that technology and help with the onboarding and the adoption and the learning curve, and be the voice of the customer and help drive more value.
And many support teams, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but many support teams measure success with metrics like ticket resolution time, CSAT scores. And I know we discussed a few more, but are these metrics really telling the full story of customer satisfaction? Or how do we use them in tandem to paint the right picture?
Yeah, it's a good point. So each of these, it's just a data point, right? Nothing is the full story. And so you just want to collect these data points in order to really paint a picture of what's going on. But you need to get the context, right? These are just meant to be early warning signals for you and raise a flag and saying, hey, there could be a problem over here. You need to go reach out and get the information, get the context, and figure out exactly where we stand. It could be a false alarm. It could be the sky is falling. We don't know, but you shouldn't take it as gospel and telling you that this is 100% churn and that counts on fire, whatever the case might be. They're just a data point, and you have to consume that and look at it as data. Get the insights that you need from it so that you can craft a conversation and have an approach that's going to yield the results that you want.
Understood. So there, yeah. And I think the way that yeah, no, I think you're about right there. That answered my question. Actually, this is an interesting follow-up question. Do you think that we're becoming too obsessed with efficiency in customer support and really focusing in on these metrics and these data points, sacrificing real human connections for the speed and resolution time?
Yes, I do. Kind of back to what we were talking about before, and infusing these chatbots haphazardly just to check a box and get rid of some labor cost and some efficiency and scale around here. And people are rushing to that, right? A little bit too quickly and too prematurely before they've truly built the customer journey and the workflow and the process and fully vetted that out before it's sound, before they try to automate and create these efficiencies, right? You need to be able to crawl, walk, run, and you can't just jump to the end goal, because if you automate a bad process, you're just going to amplify a bad process, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's correct. If you could eliminate one industry standard practice in customer success or customer support because it's doing more harm than good, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to say probably what we've been talking about is the automation. As you can tell by now, right? I'm a big person in the human and the person and the relationship going a long way. And trying to remove that completely from the equation instead of augmenting it and making it more impactful, meaningful, and efficient, right? The focus should be around treating your employees like a customer, right? Having a maniacal focus around your customer success and support people and how you can give them the tools and the resources they need to be more effective and successful in their job, just as they're trying to do for their own customers. And I think that's the formula for success, not trying to eliminate them with automation and efficiencies, but just making them more powerful, impactful, and effective with these tools and efficiencies.
So it's kind of putting more thought into it rather than just we need to automate, guys, let's automate these processes because we need to drive efficiency. It's more just like what is it actually going to do, and having that north star, whether that be the values or
Yes.
the customer centric approach, and just seeing, is this actually going to get me closer to this, or is this just is this just busy work to automate something that doesn't really need automation?
Exactly. You nailed it. I can't tell you how much I hear about, we need to implement AI and we need to automate this and that. Like, what's the outcome you're looking for? What is that really solving for you? Right.
And AI right now is like it's such a buzzword. Like everyone. I went to Collision and everyone and their mother, AI powered this, AI powered that, and I'm just thinking like these are all going to be extinct. Like 80% of them are going to be done maybe 2 or 3 years down
Absolutely.
the line because they're
And
just rewraps of Chat GPT, right?
yeah, or they're just changing their domain to a .ai is about as
Literally, yeah.
artificial as it is, right?
Yeah, well, they say like when there's a gold rush, you want to be the one selling the shovel. So I wonder what the shovel is for AI. I bet you it's the if I were to guess, I bet you it would be like the large servers people have, like like the physical actual servers where all that data is. I have no idea. I'm not a computer guy, but that could be it. That could be the
Yeah,
shovels.
where Nvidia's hitting a home run right now.
Yeah, exactly. We hear this statement a lot: "Is the customer is always right." Do you agree, or is this an outdated notion that sets unrealistic expectations?
It's outdated, unrealistic expectations, right? Half the time when they come to you, they're absolutely wrong in what they're telling you or what they're asking you. But you can't just tell them that they're wrong. Just like you mentioned, you got to be their therapist and you got to walk them through the process, even though you know the answer. You can't just tell them that. You got to help them get to it on their own inclination without making them feel bad about it, right? Have empathy for where they're coming from. This isn't, they don't live and die in your platform and do what you do 5 times a day, all day long. They're using 10 different disparate technologies. They just change jobs. Their kids homesick and they're trying to juggle work-life balance and they're on sick. You don't know that stuff. So have the empathy within your approach, whether or not they're right or wrong, and guide them to the right answer that they need and help them get there and understand it.
It's very interesting. It's very much like kind of like the hero's journey, like even that story structure. What
Yeah.
I mean by that is like because you can't when this person is at a certain emotional state, you cannot meet them like if they're low, you can't meet them high and come in, yes, I got you. You got to like almost meet them at the same tone, speak the same way, have the same language. And like that mirroring will almost trigger like, okay, this person kind of gets me. And then you just sort of describe back to them, is this your problem? And then once they feel, yes, this is it, understood, then you can kind of, be a little bit more enthusiastic and change them. So it really, you have to meet them at their level and then guide them through it rather than like you said, like just kind of jumping to the solution right
Yeah,
away. Because, and
that's
I think
exactly
that is like the empathy. That's where the empathy comes in, or like the therapist aspect of it.
100% agreed.
You've led cross-functional teams and driven collaboration between customer success, product, and sales. What's the biggest conflict you've encountered between these teams, and how did you resolve it?
Oh, there's constant conflict across teams, right? Because everyone's got, well, it depends on the organization. If they have that North Star that's aligned across the organizations, that tends to bring down the silos, eliminate the friction, and the conflict there. But just like in any team and any family, they're all somewhat dysfunctional, and have their own agendas or their own problems and things that might be going down. And the best way to resolve any of that is hearing them out. Give everyone a chance to speak their mind and get it on the table. Even those quiet people that aren't necessarily forthcoming on the team, but create a safe zone, right, with empathy, that people feel that they can speak freely without being judged and criticized or attacked. And I think that's the key, is to be able to kind of create that environment that fosters that type of collaboration. And you tend to get a lot out of your team once you get to that point.
No, it's very true, and like, because the people on the front lines, they hear it all the time. They hear the common issues. They probably have such great ideas, but if they are afraid of what their boss is going to think, or if they're afraid of having their
Yeah.
ideas heard, you're really like not tapping into this great wealth of resource. Do you believe that customer success? I think I already know the answer, but do you believe that customer success should have a seat at the table during product development discussions? And if so, why do companies still ignore this?
100% they got to have a seat at the table, right? And companies are still kind of struggling with where to put customer success. So I've seen some newer organizations, or not newer, but just more recently, you're seeing a chief customer officer or chief digital officer that tends to own revenue, and product development falls into that line and within that wheelhouse, instead of within IT and the developers. And in my opinion, that's probably the better and the right organizational structure as well, because that will then align both your customer success, your customer support, and your product owners and product management all under one roof, which are the ones that should be driving the product design in the future, where the engineers are the ones developing and executing on that vision, right? So yes,
100%.
absolutely,
Yeah.
customer success leadership needs to have a seat at the table.
100. Yeah. Like, definitely the people that are speaking with the people driving the revenue, driving the actual growth, the heartbeat of the organization, they definitely need to have a seat in there. There's often tension between customer support, success, and sales teams. Sales wants to bring in as many customers as possible, while support has to deal with the fallout. So I know we talked about this briefly, but how do you manage this delicate balance?
So one way to do that is what I mentioned, is injecting yourself in the sales cycle to a certain degree, so that you have some sales engineers that are cross-trained within customer success for training and engagement. And that's one way to do it. And another is to have both organizations roll up into the same chief revenue officer, right? So if you have a chief customer officer, where you have sales and customer success under the same roof, again, tends to align those objectives and those initiatives, and eliminate some of this. But it just needs to have that culture of doing right by the customer, and a lot of that starts at the sales cycle. Those are the early touch points where you're setting up expectations, and that's going to go a long ways in how satisfied and how smooth that onboarding is, and how good that customer experience is, right? Because if my sales team is selling a pipe dream that we can't deliver on, no amount of customer success is going to make that customer happy, right? We're going to fall short of their expectations every time.
And it makes sense that what we literally just talked about, that it's important for these teams to have seats at the table together, so they can actually have like a much more streamlined experience where everything is. Because if you don't, like, the simplest way to succeed, in my opinion, is set expectations, meet them. Like, it's really is that simple, right? But I think
Yeah.
sometimes sales teams, they get in the habit of they overpromise, not because the customer wouldn't buy the original offering, but because like they have a sort of need to prove to the customer how great they really are. So I think it's sometimes it is more on the sales team to like, because there's a culture around sales. There's, I know these sales guys are watching these memes of like, sell me this pen or sell me this, and they watch these guys like Jordan Belfort. So I think there's a bit of like a culture that's built up within them. They get the sale, close the sale. Like I met Andy Elliott. I don't know if you know who this guy is, but it's a
No.
car sales guy, and he owns something called the Elliott Group, and he's like, close the sale, take off your shirt, like make sure you get your jack, like close the sale, or price, okay, pull out your phone number, and like it was just very like pushy, and I think that's very like it's easy to buy into that, but it's also you need like the calming effect of it too, and talk with a success team and make sure you get that, because then you're being under the fire, then success team is under the fire, and if the success team's under the fire, leadership is going to be like, well, what's going on, success team, like why aren't our customers happy, and you're like, well, the expectations weren't set, but then they're like, well, the sales team's driving the revenue, so how do we tell them to stop doing the thing that's bringing people in, so you fix you, right? Has you ever had
Exactly.
a situation that happened like that? Has that ever
Oh yeah,
happened?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you nailed like half the companies to a T. That's pretty easy to do. But those are salespeople that are very transaction based and they're not relationship based, right? Whether or not you're at this company 3, 5 years from now, you're more than likely still in the same industry in the same domain. And do you think you're going to sell that same person another product or service at your next organization, right? You're jeopardizing your own integrity and your own reputation by doing something like that. So it's not in your best interest. And then if you're setting me up for failure and our customers up for failure, how am I going to get you that customer reference that you need for your next sale? How am I going to give you that referral for another sale if you do that? So really, it's all in our best interest to be on, lock and step along the same goal of delivering that great experience, because we're all going to benefit from it at the end of the day.
Are you seeing, and this is just my complete speculation, but are you seeing that now there is a much greater push towards these transactional based relationships, towards much more short term gains, because of the result of like how our culture is evolving, where everything is instantaneous. Uber Eats, you get food now. You get Amazon, you get things now. Do you think that that kind of mentality, consciously or subconsciously, is driving us to be much more like teaching treating customers as almost like products, very transactional based as it was before? In your experience, is because I know you've had a long career. This is just my hypothesis. I want to know if this is
Yeah.
like if I'm onto something here, or
So you're onto something, but I don't know if it's more of like a macro trend or company specific, right? And what I've found is that type of pressure and stress comes when your management, leadership, board, and private equity are not aligned, right? So typically it's when you're doing a cap raise and you might get some private equity money from somebody that's outside of your domain, doesn't understand your business, and is in it for a short term ROI, chop shop type of thing. You're going to get that kind of pressure 100% every single time, right? But if they are in line with the long term vision, and both your leadership, your board, and your money are all going down the same objective, you don't tend to have that as much.
it's so interesting to think. This is completely off topic, but it's so interesting to think that like as human beings, we're much more primed for short term things. Like let me get the food, I'm eat it now. Like even evolutionarily based. But
Yeah.
it's just like sometimes it makes me think like what a grand design that the thing that actually is going to get you long term success is like foregoing the thing that your biology wants the most. Like it's just I don't know. It just
Yeah.
makes me think like what an interesting way to like if there is a higher power, it's like what an interesting way to design it, right? Like
It really is. Absolutely. Test your temptation there. But that compound effect over time yields some pretty big results if you can resist.
and it's just so I find it so interesting that whenever you want something, to get it is the opposite, like seems like the opposite. It's like when you want freedom, well then it's discipline, right?
Yeah.
If you want love, then you got to give it away. Like it's just so interesting that the way that even the world
It's very
decides this,
counterintuitive.
it is, but it's like it is and it's not. I don't know. It makes me think of God or whatever. If I don't know if you believe in that.
Yeah.
But back to customer support. Uh, have you ever encountered customers that are simply uncoachable or resistant to every support and success strategy you've tried? And how did you handle that?
Yeah, I have, unfortunately. They're far and few between. Usually you can get through to people, get aligned, solve their problems, make concessions, do what you have to. But there comes the, one in a million where it doesn't matter what you do. It's just that you have a stain that's not going to go away, and that relationship's not going to be mended. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just to let it go. And you got to know when that time is, because just by trying to hang on, you might just make it worse. And you don't necessarily want to hold somebody captive into a contractual agreement indefinitely and hold them hostage to that if we're not able to see eye to eye. We're not a good fit. We're not mutually helping each other out, because it can just lead to disastrous outcomes. So it's
This
best to have that balance and understand when it's time to walk away.
and I think that makes sense. And I think this leads actually perfectly well into my next question is there's a growing focus on mental health and customer support roles and customer success roles too. How do you help your team in the past? So I know right now you're currently a one-man team, but how do you help, or even yourself, I guess, how do you help your team or yourself manage the stress and emotional load that comes with dealing with angry or frustrated customers? And the reason I ask that is because generally when you have empathy, it's easier to take on that load from others and feel it yourself, which is why you're so good at empathy. But then
Yeah.
how do you offload that, or how do you not take that home with you?
It's very hard not to. That's a wonderful question. So it's you have to be empathetic towards your team, towards your employees, and towards yourself, and allow yourself that time to be resilient and recharge and take a break. So it's extremely important to focus on your physical health, which plays a large toll into your mental health as well, in my being, right? And afford them that balance, and that which usually comes with time and understanding, right? In this culture, in this day and age, we're so shamed into taking any kind of time off for personal things. But really, if what you need to be balanced every single day and have that recharge, to be resilient and bounce back after the bullets you take from all your customers that are in a bad place, is take a break for an hour every morning at 9 o'clock to go do yoga, by all means, go do it. I'm going to encourage you to block your calendar and do that, because you're going to come back so much happier, so much more productive, in such a better headspace to better serve your customers, that it's worth that hour tenfold, right? Give you the flexibility that you need to pick up your kids and drop them off at soccer practice from 4 to 5 every single day, and tend to your workload at a different time to do your catch up. I think that goes a long way in building trust from your employees, and it really, really pays dividends down the road. It's so short-sighted for us to try to just squeeze every ounce of productivity out of them and shame them into taking that time off. How many SaaS companies have an unlimited PTO policy, but the second you look for some time off, you're just kind of, everyone's looking at you like, what are you doing? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand why it's built that way. Like it makes sense from like a corporate perspective,
Yeah.
and it was very well engineered. But I think we're gonna really start to see, and like maybe this is exactly why there's gonna be such a huge push towards developing these AI chatbots or these robots, because then they're like that they'll see, well, if the human can't work, if he needs time, this person doesn't, like this robot doesn't, right? So sadly, I think that is going to be a reality, but we'll see. We'll see how that evolves. Maybe not. I'm hoping I'm wrong. Is there a time where you stood firm on a policy that a customer hated, but in hindsight, you knew it was the right call for the business?
I'm sure there was. I can't think of one off the top of my head right now.
No worries. We can skip that one. What's the
Yeah.
most surprising thing you've learned about customers that most businesses completely overlook?
Hmm. I guess the fact that they're human. They care about you and your business, and their objectives and their goals. And you don't necessarily always have to, bend and yield to their every beck and call, right? Sometimes they tend to respect, boundaries and limitations. And really, they just asking you the question so that they can get the answer that they're looking for, not necessarily looking for you to, you feel the pressure to, as you can see, move mountains for your customers every time they have an ask and a request for you. But sometimes just letting them know that that's not possible, or it's out of the scope of what we can do. And I wish I could help you with that. It's just fine. That's okay to say that.
Understood. I like that one. I like that one. We're gonna wrap up here in the next 5 minutes. This has been a great discussion. I do have a few more questions for you, and we did touch upon this briefly, but I don't think we expanded upon it. So, where do you see the role of AI and machine learning in customer success going in the next 5 years? Will it be a game changer or just another support tool?
I think if used correctly, it will be a game changer, right? I think it's going to help, not just a direct tool for your customers or to interact and communicate with your customers, but the way that it's going to help our customer success managers and our support agents get such deeper insights into our customers and how they use our tools and our platforms and navigate them. And for me to get that information and that insight in an actionable way in an instant is just going to make me so much more powerful in what I can do for my customers. And I think that's the one perspective and the lens that we're not necessarily looking at it, right? Everyone's looking at it as, how do you replace a customer success manager or a customer support agent by putting these bots and this automation between my company and the customer? You don't need to. If you pivot it and make it a tool for your customer success and your customer support to be 10x more effective, I think that's the change that we're going to see in the people that apply it and use it correctly are going to just win in leap and bounds.
So you're not seeing like the Doomsday Terminator 3 man versus the machines. You're seeing more of like the cyberpunk, like the man integrates with the machine and has the eye, like the eye and the enhancements,
The
and it'll be like an
RoboCop, right?
enhancement
Yeah.
of RoboCop. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, if your job is doing password resets all day long or adding and removing users, yes, you're probably going to get automated from there. But it's time to, elevate your skill set and deliver and drive more to the organization if that's the case.
do you think there's a danger on over relying on technology in customer success and losing the entire human element entirely?
Yeah, there is. I mean, as you can tell, I'm very big on relationship, right? But it also depends on what kind of product and service you're offering, right? It's a very simple tool. You may or may not need that relationship component to it. So to very, light, scalable platforms, maybe you're okay automating it. But things go wrong. Internet goes out, servers go down. What's your business continuity plan? What's your disaster recovery plan if something goes wrong with your automation? Is there anybody that has a skill set in your organization to do the work, solve the problems that are needed that you've been relying so heavily on these bots for? Right. I'm in the mortgage industry, and we've automated and created digital mortgages for the past 20, 30 years, ever since the internet came about. But I did a lot of loans with pen and paper back in the day, and it's doable. So if for some reason my loan origination system or platform went down, or I had no connection in a rural area with a customer, can I still take an application? Do I have that skill set? So I don't know.
That's going to be very interesting to see if the internet just shuts down completely, just like seeing, oh, now what's going to happen now? Back to pen and paper. That'd be a
I mean, I'm not
scenario
sure
I
that
could.
happens,
I know, I know.
indefinitely worldwide kind of thing, but Verizon was down for a while, not too long ago. But
That's right. I got one final question here. So, looking back, what's one decision you've made that significantly changed the trajectory of your career in customer success? And would you do it again?
yeah, it's going to seem funny to you, but it's actually realizing what I do and what I love to do is customer success. If you look at my resume and my background, it looks like I got an identity crisis, right? I came out as in loan origination and wholesale and retail and worked for large and small lenders, and then somehow fell backwards into a technology role. And it wasn't until I was hired as a customer success executive that I even heard about that role and that function as an organization. And since then, I pivoted to product management and all these different things. And I worked as a CTO and all that to realize that, yes, I can Google and YouTube and chat GPT any job I need to be successful at it. But where I felt most fulfilled in what I was doing and creating the most value for my customers was in the world of customer success. So getting a better understanding of what that is and what it means and how to kind of preach that and socialize it throughout my organization to have them understand their perspective and purview of it has been really impactful and enlightening for me to do. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept of an ikigai. It's a Japanese concept of kind of finding your sweet spot of your vocation and what you get paid for and whatnot. And I had to do some soul searching to get there to realize that, this is my jam. This is what I like to do and what I want to do. And I'm good at it. And it doesn't feel like work when I do it. And I can do this for another 30, 40 years and be extremely happy in doing that. So just coming to that realization was probably the most impactful thing at all about customer success.
I love that. I also have an ikigai, so I totally understand that concept.
Thanks.
Varant, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. We went 10 minutes over time, but that's fine because I loved our conversation. I thought it was great. I think it's going to be very, very valuable. I know I've learned a ton. Do you have any final messages or any final words for the viewers?
Nothing profound. I'm just so excited to be here. I really glad that you engaged and reached out and invited me here on this podcast. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
100%. And where can they, if people want to reach out to you, if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
LinkedIn's the best place to find me. I have a pretty unique name, so you can look me up pretty easily. Veront Herkulian is the one and only.
All right, Wajah, just put that up on the screen over here. Well, thank you so much, Veront. Pleasure to have you. I'm sure I'll have you on again.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Take care.
You too.